Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Gotham Chess Slow Run. This is episode number 19. And for the first 18 episodes, we started at 400 on chess.com. We climbed up the rating ladder, and after 71 games, we graduated to the 4-digit club. So if you missed those first 18 episodes, or you're too high rated and proud to watch them, or you watched them but forgot everything, you can go ahead and watch them again, because today we begin the climb to the 5-digit club. Yes, I will be doing this slow run until I hit 10,000 ELO. No, just kidding. I will be going up until around 2,000 or 2,200, the master level, the traditional number that is associated with the master level. But today we will see what happens at the 1,000 rapid rating. What changes? How much do people play their openings? How much are people violating principles? How much are people setting up tactics and so on and so forth? Okay, here we go. Here we go. What changes? Now, what's funny is our first opponent is slightly below 1,000. First opponent plays pawn to e3. That's a weird move. I have said in the episode 18, I said you can play the reverse London if you ever don't know what to do, especially in a position where somebody does not play the move pawn to e4. But honestly, in this case, technically the right thing to do is to occupy the center with 2 pawns. Now, what's funny about this position is that we are playing into what's called the Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack. The Nimzo-Larsen is an opening with b3, bishop b2, and e3. I played this also several episodes ago. At some point, I might prepare just like a Google Doc where I just show like every game that I played, what opening that it was, and I might be sharing that with all of you. But in the meantime, 2 pawns in the center. A couple of episodes ago, I did in fact play this move, bishop to b2, and then, I showed that you have to defend your center pawn with your knight, and in that game, I played the move bishop to b5. My opponent here is playing knight f3, which is a very reasonable move. Generally, my approach has been, if you can attack a knight with a center pawn, you should do that, because it's going to just make your opponent waste time, and here we do in fact see our opponent wasting some time, moving the knight multiple times. We can take. That would bring the bishop in over here. This is a completely reasonable exchange for black because we trade off one of white's pieces. The bishop comes here where it can just be a target. We also don't have to trade. We can just develop, but keep in mind that if they take us, we will double our pawns, although we will have a solid center. Both are honestly okay. If you are to take and allow this bishop in, I would love to offer this trade of bishops, but that would simply blunder this pawn. So by far the most natural move is knight to f6. Pawn to f6 is not too dumb, but the problem is all you do is attack the bishop, and then when the bishop moves, you just can't move your knight there anymore. So I'm just going to play knight f6 and bishop here and castle. Now, the correct way to play this position at master level is actually kind of like that. It's to offer a trade so that the opponent can develop the bishop and everything. But in general, pawn trades like this, at the 1,000 level, I would say like keeping the tension is a completely reasonable option. You can, especially because you're just going to come in and take with a knight. There's really nothing too bad about that. I would avoid trading the queen in a way where you lose the right to castle, but there is no need to take a pawn to just help our opponent get a piece out. Instead, I'm just going to develop the bishop here. You'll notice I'm not giving these checks. We have gone past that elo where we need to give checks like that. And actually, black, if anything, has a developmental lead, right? Like, that's just the reality. Knight to c3. Okay, this move targets the center. So now probably I should do something about this pawn or else my opponent will take. Another possibility is that white could go knight to b5, which is not like a losing move, but it just has to be, I have to be on the lookout for that. We have multiple decisions. I don't think taking now is bad, so I will do it. But of course that will help develop, the position for the opponent. Another option was to go queen to b4, which would have pinned the knight to the king. I didn't do that because white could just block, and I don't see a follow-up, so I don't really know why my queen is standing over there. But I took on d3, my opponent takes. I don't have any checks. I haven't castled yet, so honestly, there's really not much to think about here. That's what I'm going to do. And I haven't developed my bishop yet, which it's going to be solid on this square. or it can be a little bit more active on g4. There's really not a huge benefit to going to g4, because if anything, I'm just going to help my opponent go up and bring the rook, but I'm just going to play this anyway because, I mean, it looks like a very decent move, right? And if the opponent were to play pawn to f3, blocking my attack, then I would bring the bishop back, and pawn to f3 would weaken the pawn on e3. In fact, after pawn to f3, I really wonder if the best move for black is queen to c5, immediately attacking the knight and this pawn, and just reminding the opponent that they have created a big weakness. Okay, bishop to e2 is pretty annoying as well. I mean, we already see the first game in the 1000 club is honestly very decent. Like, I have played 12 moves, and unless my opponent has their older sibling playing the moves for them, white has not made any drastic mistake at all yet. At this point, notice I'm not rushing. I'm still bringing my rooks into the center where they will defend and participate, but black has absolutely zero advantage here. Okay, now black has an advantage, but it's about spotting your opportunities, really. This one little queen shift already worsens white's position considerably. Now, in this position, I did not play queen to c5 because even though I would be attacking the knight, there is really no benefit as the knight would simply be protected. Also, the knight could move. This one little shift of the queen destabilizes this entire side of the board. And now, after the simple queen c6 or even queen c5, I think both kind of accomplish the same thing. It's tough to say. Both of these moves hit the knight and the pawn behind it. So the queen now can't defend the knight at all because if pawn to e4, I just take it. I have 4 things controlling that square. And spotting things like this in the middle of an otherwise totally innocuous position is very important to gaining rating. Like, of course I could have just brought my rook. But look, out of nowhere, my opponent just played 13 completely reasonable moves and just hung a knight. Gave it away. This is chess at 1000. If I had not spotted queen to c6, this would have been a 40-move game. I would have brought my other rook. I would have kept doing a lot of improving moves. But it's about spotting the weaknesses in the opponent's position. At the 900, 800, 700, 600 level, we talked about things like hanging pieces, people doing ridiculous stuff in the opening. At this point, you could go pawn hunting. There is nothing really wrong with this move. I would just be a little bit careful bringing a queen so deep into the opponent's territory. Plus, we never actually finished our development, right? So let's do this just because it's better to participate in the game with all the rooks. Anyway, at the previous rating area, I mean, there were pieces getting blundered left and right, like in the first 10 moves. And here, that was a pretty egregious mistake. I don't know how that happened. The attack is, of course, on this pawn. Now, white should never trade the queen here. Never in a million years. Never. You should never trade the queen here if you're playing with white. You lose a massive counter-attacking piece. You should go queen b4. And look, you know, some people here with black, they would see this, and they would see the mate on h2, and they would go knight g4 and just blunder this in one move. Right, I'm going to play, obviously, not that. I'm going to defend myself. I think white will play a5. I think people generally, like, keep their eyes on a side of the board and then try to come up with relatively safe moves. But pawn to a5 allows takes, and then, look, knight to g4. There are 2 ways to win a winning position. One of them is to trade all the pieces. Trade the queen, trade the knight, trade the rooks. Another way is to coordinate your pieces in a way where you just go for a mate. Now, if my queen was on h4, this would be over. Because I would be attacking both these pawns. But now white can defend with pawn to g3. Another thing to keep in mind is the queen does see my rook. It's not threatening my rook, but it sees the rook, and that is annoying. Now, here, as we continue to hunt the king for checkmate, like with queen h5, every pawn move is going to be another weakening. So every time the opponent moves a pawn forward, the king is going to get more and more exposed. The squares behind the king are going to get more and more exposed. Look, I'm just going to keep poking at the king, right? Like I just keep setting up one move threats and the pawns keep coming forward. Now at some point, white will play a move like rook f1 or queen e2, and then yeah, and I'm not going to have as much of an opportunity to get in here, but it's very important to understand how to coordinate your queen and knight. And queen and knight coordinate not just to target a pawn, but also on certain squares. Queen h3 would be game over for white, and see, white doesn't even sense the danger. I'm not threatening knight to f3. You can weave a checkmate net. You don't need to give a check. It's much nicer to play a move like queen h3, taking away the opponent's runaway squares before they are able to even realize what's going on. Now white only has one move, and it's queen to e2. It's the only move in the position. After queen to e2, I can play knight to g4, threatening mate again, only this time I am behind the pawns, which is significantly worse, and white will need to lose a lot of material. Queen e2, knight g4, f3 takes, queen g2 takes, knight e3, king g1, knight f1, and I'm simply up a rook and some pawns in that endgame. Or this, but then I can take this pawn with check. And then I'm going to take this pawn with check, and I'm gonna pick up a couple of pawns here, so now I have a 5-point advantage. And then I will come back with my queen, and now I don't even need my knight. With the opening of this file, I can now do a good old-fashioned ladder mate. Suddenly the pawns are totally gone, and black just wins. And actually here, famous pattern, I will show this to you, I don't even need my rook. Sometimes the defensive rook takes away a runaway square from the king. That was, again, like games at 1,000 from the opening, people are not doing dumb things. They're really just not, like they're playing very, very reasonable chess. The move queen f3 set off an alarm in my head. Now, how did it set off an alarm, right? As we boot up the good old-fashioned analysis here. 1 second. I'm messaging back my grandparents on WhatsApp. That is we got the family group chat. So this position was totally equal. 0.1. If anything, black is very slightly better because black has the faster development. But had my opponent played rook to d1, and then I played rook to d8, and then my opponent played rook to d3. Why? Because, well, you've got to use the rooks, right? White would have just been totally equal. And this would have been a game that went on and on and on. On and on. And I'm waiting for games like this in the slow run at the 1500 level because people are just, I mean, they're just not going to hang knights. Like, you're going to have to set them up for failure. In this particular game, you know, how did my opponent, how did I immediately realize that this was a mistake, right? Well, first of all, it's because I saw that the knight was hanging. I saw that the knight was hanging throughout the game. I saw that this was hanging. But the only way to attack that knight in a meaningful way, not in some stupid way, like just queen b4, okay, it gets defended. Then what? That's the question. Then what? There was no way to attack it in a meaningful way. But the second the queen went there, I was like, wait a minute. The queen can't guard the knight anymore. How can you pick up on stuff like this? At 1,000, to consistently pick up on stuff like this is probably pretty unreasonable because you have to have a consistent train of thought. The train of thought has to always be there because why? Because that's chess, ultimately. That's chess, right? Like, imagine you're looking at the neighbor's house, right? And the neighbor has a dog that tries to get into your yard. Well, every time there's a spot in the fence that's breaking down, you spot it, and that's where the dog can run in. So you try to patch it up. You know, it's not like the dog appeared and you're like, whoa, now I don't know what to do. Or like, I don't know, you forgot the neighbor had a dog to begin with, like, and now they're, like, now you're like, oh, dog, like, that's kind of how chess works. Like, you're looking at the same thing constantly. So you have to understand, like, okay, the queen guards the pawn, the queen it could guard the knight. Now, when the second the queen went there, you're like, wait a minute. And to be honest with you, all of this is because this pawn is not on b2. If that pawn was on b2 guarding the knight, then c2 wouldn't even be a thing because the knight would just be in the way. And another thing here is, how do you avoid mistakes like this? By following principles. White never moved the rooks. You're just not playing with the rooks. You're not using the material. And this is the only open file. You need to put the rook somewhere it's useful. The rooks are staring at pawns right now, right? There's nothing going on, with the rooks at all. So you have to be able to move the rooks into the center line. I think that's by far the most important thing. Well, I think the rest of the game was pretty self-explanatory. I managed the position, and I think the most instructive thing here is how to launch a knight and queen attack against the king, and how tricky it is for the opponent to defend with only pawns. It's not possible. You poke at the pawns, and they all end up coming forward. And look, like, this position is very bad, but this position is basically just fatal. Queen h5, queen f5, bringing the knight back, and now you jump in with the queen, and now you play takes, and here, and it just, yeah, that was the game basically in a nutshell. Let's go for another game. Let's see what happens. This is now the strongest player that we have played in the slow run. I mean, every episode we're going to get another stronger player. I've played Scandinavian. Let's play e5. Let's see if people still play this. Okay, to my great happiness, they do not. Knight to c6. We're playing typical king's pawn. Now, what is the opponent going to do? We have an Italian game. So I've played several times already the Italian. I've played knight f6. I've played bishop c5. I will show you, knight f6, there is some fried liver business. With knight g5, there's some tricky lines there. I will show you how I like to play the Italian. I like to play the bishop on c5 straight away. Then I like to play h6. This is one of my favorites. Bishop to okay, c3. Very, very good move. This is now officially this is big boy territory, big girl territory. All right, like White is trying to play d4. I mean, this is like completely normal. Responding with d4. This is how all the pros play this position. Now we take this moment to develop another piece and attack the pawn on e4. Now, grandmasters like to play d3. Beginners and intermediate, and frankly, even like master level players like to play d4. Don't get scared of d4. We will take it. And then you have to know how to maneuver these pieces after that. Okay, but my opponent just does this, which is also totally fine. So now, the way I like to play these Italians, of course you can just castle, but I like to play with h6. h6 prevents anything from going to g5. So first of all, that's number one. You will never be under any pressure on that side of the board. But I actually like to play the Italian where I end up castling queenside. And in the long run, the type of game you get is very exciting because you get g5. And then you start an attack on the opponent's king. Now, of course, White can play d4 at some point. But we are very, very secure in the center of the board. And we are doing very nicely. So you can even go g5 now if you're feeling up for it. But this is, you could also play bishop e6, you can play queen e7. The computer will have some preference as to these moves, but overall, they are all kind of interchangeable, practically speaking. Not if the computer was playing the position, but if you're playing the position. g5 is one of these moves where, because White committed the king and you didn't, you can now launch some sort of an attack. By the way, great move by White, great move. Very good understanding of the position. c3, b4 coming in, maybe a4 as well. We've already seen how to handle that if the opponent plays a4. But this is kind of giving me an indication like we have to be a little bit careful if we castle this way because obviously the opponent will try to trap our position. Now this looks like a miscalculation. That just looks like I can take the pawn. That just looks like I have more attackers on that than my opponent. So it looks like my opponent miscounted, unless this is some sort of preparation. Pawn to b5. Okay, very interesting. Now, if I go here, I'm hitting the bishop. I can also play knight e5, which does the same thing, but threatens to trade the knights. I mean, threatens to trade the knights. There is also pawn takes c3. So if takes, then takes. That also looks pretty reasonable. So at this point, I think pawn takes is the riskiest move because after this trade, the correct way to evaluate that position is, my king is in the middle. But let's go for it and let's just see. Let's just take a look at what happens. Okay. So I took a pawn, and now I took 2 pawns. I have a 2-pawn advantage, right? I have a 2-pawn advantage. But, okay, my opponent takes my knight. I'm also going to take the knight. I'm also going to take the knight. And now, a very interesting moment. Okay, they take back with the bishop. That's fine. And now this pawn is free, but my king is in the center. So I'm not, I'm not loving that. But obviously taking this is also okay. The big question here is going to be how quickly can I get my king out of the center of the board, right? That's really going to be the issue, right? How quickly can I get my king out of the center? E5 looks like a reasonable move for white. Bishop C3 also looks like a reasonable move. Trying to put a little bit more pressure on me. Right. Bishop E3 I'm slightly less convinced by. I think white should have taken this moment to have their kind of initiative and do something with it, right? Because first of all, I don't even have to take this bishop. I don't have to take. I could just castle. I have to kind of bite the bullet here because like both ways to castle look a little bit dangerous. But the good thing is I'm up 2 pawns. If I do take, I damage the pawn structure. The bad thing is, in the long run, I open the rook. So since this move does not require me to do anything, I think now might be a good time to commit my king. But it is a little scary, I have to tell you. And I as I scan the board, I'm not really happy with either option. But sometimes you just got to go for it and hope for the best, right? We played an opening in a certain way to try to play in a certain way. What ultimately ended up happening is the opponent gave us 2 pawns. But the trade-off is the king is open. Now you need to adjust to the situation. And this is kind of crazy that this is 1,000. At like 600 level, there would have been 3 pieces blundered already, right? So at this point, still I think the best practical move for white is somehow maybe starting an attack over here or going, something like this. But the more that white waits, the less they're going to get in this game, right? They're not going to be able to attack us at all, right? So plus another move to trade some pieces will be something like a bishop to e6. Okay, knight to d4. Reasonable move. This move attacks this pawn. That's kind of it. The other thing that this move does is it opens up the f-pawn. I will be quite impressed if my opponent spots that. But for now, let's just play bishop here. There is obviously nothing wrong with this. And this is still hanging. I could have maybe now taken that pawn. And maybe this pawn would have been a good thing to kind of trade off. But let's see. If my opponent finds pawn to f4, I will be extremely impressed. Extremely impressed. And frankly, maybe even in a little bit of trouble. But let's just hope that doesn't happen. But it's instructive how just one weakness in front of a king can become such a powerful target. If f4 comes in, opening up the bishop and the rook, I'm going to have to play pawn to g4 probably. I'm going to need to keep the position as closed as possible for as long as possible. I cannot allow the rook. I cannot allow the queen into the position. If I take, I'm probably almost lost, which is, you don't know that at 1,000, but yes. Now, a bad move would be knight f5, because immediately what I would do is I would trade the knight and trade the bishop. 2 pieces disappear for white, and white blocks their own attack. So it's instructive how this is basically the only move now. It's the only move. Yeah, my opponent doesn't sense it, and that's very understandable. Now I'm going to set a little trap. I will play queen e7. I am threatening this pawn. Knight f5 might come in now, because what could be better than attacking a queen? But then I will show you how 2 trades will totally neuter the white position. And now f4 might be the last chance. It's already very dicey, as I'm going to be taking a pawn. Queen f3 is actually it's a reasonable move, which I think still runs into some problems at this very moment. First of all, I haven't brought all my pieces. Second of all, I am looking at moves like bishop to g4. I almost trapped the queen. I'm not trading the bishop, even though I would like to trade some pieces, because I'm not trying to trade the wrong pieces. But how about a move like knight to g4? Knight to g4 is a problem for white, because I'm going to be getting at least the bishop off the board and maybe even the knight. And the queen was not supposed to lead the attack. It should have been the queen and the rook. Queen should have come into h5 or something like that, right? So, yeah, the position now for white will very quickly turn into a losing position, right? So, and queen e5 actually, I think, just is winning. Okay, so I've talked about this move. I mean, I have to get rid of the knight. White has now lost 1 attacking piece. And queen f5, oh, but yeah, but when the pawn is blocking everything, now we will trade the knight. Bishop might have also been reasonable, but we trade. And I hope it's quite clear that after pawn takes, obviously the best move is to take with the queen. There is a crazy move here, which is pawn to f6. I mean, That's why I hesitated. Rook E1. Wow. That's also a very, very creative move. Just leaving my knight here. Yeah, this game is not over yet. Now this is a very difficult moment. This is probably some like 1500 minimum level position, if not even higher. Black now has to not allow the reopening of the position, the attack on the queen, and the takeaway of the defense of the king. It's much better to blockade the queen and the bishop from never having vision over here and then converting the position up 3 pawns. I have a 3-pawn advantage. 2-pawn advantage. So now what we can do is like, well, first of all, this is hanging. So we should probably block the queen's vision. Then we will use the open file, and then we will crash in. Notice we are always looking at this rook, just in case, right? But yeah, this was a very decent game by white. I mean, very clear that to get to 1,000 and beyond, and this player, I would be willing to bet, has been 1,100. I'm not going to check their profile because I respect people's privacy in the slow run. Very clearly a very, very, very good player. Okay, there is nothing hanging here, so I play rook e8, and I line up my targets on this pawn. This person has also balanced their time very well. I mean, what more can you say? The best move here is probably king to h1, unpinning, so that you can push the pawn to e4. Right now, like, everything in white's position is good, except the king's position. So sliding the king off of the diagonal is probably the way to play. Otherwise, I'm just gonna, double up on the e-file, triple up on the e-file, and maybe win that pawn on e3. This game also 1,030-ish is my opponent's rating. I mean, like really high level stuff here. And there's no stream sniping. I'm recording this in my house, so unless this person is in my closet, like they... And there you go. I mean, the person just played pawn to e4. That's completely crazy. Like, this is... of course, now they might blunder checkmate. But then you see how I'm playing. Everybody's getting a turn after I've solved the problem of my weak king. All right? After I've solved the problem of my weak king. Now I'm slowly threatening to chip away at the center. But even here, the game is not over yet. I mean, it's really not over. Like, I still need to convert this, and I have to be accurate in how I do this. My king can come forward, defending some more of the dark squares. I was going to say this position indicates precisely the case of the opposite-colored bishops. The opposite-colored bishops fight for totally different things. I'm fighting against the king on the dark squares. This bishop is fighting on the light squares. It will put pressure on my pawns, right? If the pawns were not here, it would be attacking my king quite nicely. So yeah, this is a pretty, and as I literally just predicted, my opponent blunders the rook. I was going to say, it's going to be a pretty tough game to crack, but my opponent ultimately blundered. And when the bishop comes back, there's several ways to win this position. I think the easiest is to team the queen up with the bishop and show just how powerful the dark square attack is. It is impossible to stop mate. Opposite colored, bishop attacking, queen g1, the king can't move, the pawns can't move in time. And that is a mate. That is a mate. So there you go. There you go. That was a tough game. I can't believe that this person is rated 1,030. We will analyze this Italian a little bit. We will, and I will show you the benefit of having a repertoire, of course. And this slow run is not designed to win with tricks and traps. I could do another one where I literally only play tricky openings all the time. The Italian is one of these things. It's one of these openings that black can play several different things. You kind of wish you can play all of them at once. My favorite way at this level to play the Italian is to play knight to f6, knight to g5, and then play the Traxler. Traxler. A completely fantastic opening, relying on knight takes f7 fork and bishop takes f2 sacrifice. And the thing is, even if people learn what to do in the Traxler, which is bishop takes and then bringing the bishop back, The position that you get with black is extremely tricky. Extremely tricky. For example, if they come to fork you like this, then after queen f8 and like this, you win with bishop f2. So you are always threatening things. I mean, there's all sorts of nasty business brewing here. The opponent has to play very accurately, moves like knight c3, and then you play rook f8 with an attack brewing, you know, and then white has to be super, super careful. Queen e8 comes in, queen g6, knight d4, the bishop comes, very active position. Engine nerds will be like, oh, the Traxler is terrible because the computer says so. Another opening that I've been enjoying recently is knight f6, the Petrov Gambit. I made a little course on this, kind of like the Petrov invitation, and then you play pawn to d5. Super tricky position as well, this one. d4, knight c6, and you get this position, and, you know, if they check you, you block and everything, and you get a strong initiative, you develop all your pieces. But if they're not careful, you can just completely blow them off the board, like knight c3, boom, boom, castle, put the rooks in the middle of the board, and life is great. But yes, if you want to play the traditional Italian bishop c5, then white has several approaches. The way my opponent played in this game was very good. Had they not played b4, I would have, you know, castled. I went for g5, very aggressive move. You know, black can also play something like bishop e6, takes, and then if b4 and all this, you just play solid, and then you can castle, and then start a kingside attack. So there's many, many ways that you can play. I tried to show you, you know, the way with g5. The opponent was playing fantastic. d4 was a mistake, but then they followed it up with b5. And here, I could have gone knight a5 or knight e5. I went for this. The computer thinks that this is quite risky. If you look at this position, queen d2, bishop d2 was a mistake. It was actually better for white to leave this pawn completely and do this. Now, if my opponent played this, I probably would have thought they were cheating, like, to be totally honest. Yes, 3 different things can take that. And the point is that, look at this. This is exactly what we've talked about. Even though black is up 3 pawns, which is three pawns is a lot of pawns. White is actually better. White is better because black's king is weak. So weak, stuck in the center. Very instructive position, to be honest. But even here, I mean, I thought the best move was probably something like a bishop c3, or king is in the middle, you need to strike. You gotta strike in the center. At this point, taking is gonna run me into some serious problems, as we can see here. So I would have had to not take, keep my opponent's pieces blocked, and maybe even just castle, just get out of there. What happened in the game, though, with castles in this position is, again, I thought, practically speaking, the best move here is for white to play f4. I really thought that logically this made... but I'm looking at it now. Yeah, f4, knight g4 is very strong. Yeah, knight g4 is... Because the thing is, look, if I take, look, white surges back. I said I'm practically almost losing here because the rook comes in, the queen comes into f3, and then rook comes into f1. It's very different analyzing games with an engine and analyzing games with an engine for 1000s. Because yes, I probably would have spotted knight to g4, but practically speaking, like, this is not an easy position, you know? You got to try to keep things closed, and you got to try to think like a 1000. And I mean, people, you know, what's interesting about the slow run is people watch the slow run, really teenagers. I mean, adults don't watch the slow run and behave like this. Children watch the slow run with an engine, and then they're like, Levy, what are you talking about? F4 is terrible. There's knight g4, something, you know, something along these lines. I know, like, but there's a difference between being instructive for a 1000 and finding these moves in my own games. Practically speaking, the move f4 is very tricky at the 1000 level, and it follows the principles of, well, there's a king there, so you got to try to break. In the game, you know, my opponent did this, and I thought I played quite reasonably to trade these pieces. Rook fe1 was unbelievable, by the way. Like, what a move. And then, I said that here the best move is definitely king h1, and my opponent played it. So, yeah, very, very high level. And I hope it was instructive how I kept applying pressure. I don't know how my opponent, out of nowhere, just blundered the entire game after playing so well, but I suppose they felt the clock pressure, you know, and that's normal. That's what happens. Okay, let's keep going. Let's play one more game. I played d4. I played e4. Let's go for e4. Let's see what we get. Maybe it's time for a little Vienna. It's been a minute since I played a Vienna. The Vienna is one of the best openings below the level of 2000. My opponent plays the Sicilian defense. Now I will play the Alapin with c3. Try to get a big center. The two main moves are d5 and knight f6, but almost nobody plays them. When faced with this, people generally play one of these two moves, allowing white to take the full center. But let's see how well 1000s know openings. The Alapin is a very comfortable opening against the Sicilian because you just get a position where you have two pawns in the center. And then you develop the rest of your pieces. Okay, interesting. Black plays it like this. Okay. What I have done here is actually I've now turned the game into a French defense. So we now have this extremely locked position, right? One of the two ways to handle one of these positions is just develop and move on with your life, or target where they have left this little pawn, pawn to b3. Now, if black gets into a big, grappling match, locks everything, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. They're going to lose the game immediately. Look at this. They're going to lose the game immediately. They're going to go a6, and after pawn takes, they will hang a rook. Okay, this move is actually not so bad. Now, we will take. Of course, we wanted to do this the whole time. And now you can take. You can also just develop something. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking on c4 to try to kind of block the gridlock, to, get out of the gridlock. And now, with such an open king, look, d pawn, c pawn, b pawn, e pawn, everybody left the king. You can just win a pawn here. We have a very straightforward tactic, which is just a check, and then you pick up a pawn. And this is just to show that this just doesn't work in the opening. You cannot play silly stuff. You have to be like the previous opponent, who played very, very well. They played very decently in the opening. And now, we just win a pawn. We just have an extra pawn. We did a nice little fork. Now we can move on. We don't need to... Rook a6 attacks the knight. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work. The knight will be defended. The knight will move. Let's develop. Let's castle. Let's be a pawn up. And let's play that position. The thing about 1000s, though, is that even though you win a pawn in the opening, the game doesn't end. It's really like every game is going to go 30, 40 moves. Okay, pawn to h6 is kind of a weird move. I don't know what it does. Let's just castle. Following our principles, we still haven't developed the bishop. We can move the bishop out this way, or how about this? I'm going to show you something you've never seen before. What if we develop the bishop this way, and it stares down the entire diagonal? That's really a nice positioning for the bishop. Hey, rook c8. Are there threats? There might be. There really might be. Our queen is on the other side. The knight could maybe take the pawn. You got to look at some of this stuff. So maybe we move the queen to d3. The advanced calculation of queen d3 is the queens are on opposite ends of the d file, so you have to be a little careful that there are no tactics. Knight takes e5, pawn takes would hang the queen, but knight takes, you're fine. So this is fine, a4 is fine, a2 is weird. I don't know why you would go there. So any of these moves really are okay. Pick one, really. Let's go to e2. Another little thing. We've talked about outposts. We've talked about where would we like our pieces to be? Like, where would I like the knight to be? There. I would love if the knight could get to d6. Well, we can go do that. Knight e4, knight d6, where it is, look at this. This is the stuff that's going to get you to the 1400 club, right? Galloping into the position. Also, this is not that bad. This is stronger because it's much more anchored on d6. But this is not bad because ultimately you will weaken the king. Like, this bishop will be traded and the king will be a little weak. But I mean, look at this move. Knight d6. Imagine you get a knight to d6 and another knight to e4 and a pawn on c5. The knight is anchored in by like 5 different pieces on d6, hitting every single square in the position. So this move is designed to not let you go here, right? So one thing we haven't done yet is we haven't moved our rooks. So we should probably move them. Now, where do we move them? Well, me personally, I kind of like how open this file is, right? Now, suddenly my rook just controls the whole file. The best move in that position, though, was pawn to g4. Now, as a 1000, you're not going to be thinking, push the pawns in front of my king, right? It's not really something that comes up. But we would like to get our knight to d6, and sometimes you can push a pawn in front of your king, especially when the position is locked, especially when you have a lead in development, and especially when the opponent only really has one piece standing around your king. This is the only piece anywhere near your king, and so g4 is actually totally reasonable, right? Totally reasonable move. To be honest with you, if you don't play g4, I'm not really sure how else you can make progress here, but I will show you. I will try my best. Black's king is still stranded in the center due to our very powerful bishop, so now I will gallop into the position with the queen. I will attack the knight, I will target the pawn, I will target the rook, and I will try to get my rook to b7, where it attacks the queen and the king in the center of the board. Of course, g4 continues to be the best move. The knight wants to take my bishop. I can move the bishop out of danger, completely reasonable move. I can also use danger levels, an age-old concept on this channel. Danger levels, rook to b7, defended by the queen, and black is almost immediately completely lost. Like, totally lost, but it's survivable. Unfortunately. Unfortunately, it's not totally over. If queen comes to c6, which is actually a pretty decent move, rook to c6. Wow. So rook c6 loses on the spot. Spotting it is a little bit tricky, right? So the idea is obviously if I take the queen, they take me. I can also take the pawn with my queen. I think a lot of people would just see that, queen takes pawn, and they would be like, well, then I'm just teaming up with my rook, and it's probably the best move. But let me show you why it's so important to apply CCA. If you look at CCA in this position, checks, captures, attacks, both of the knights can be taken. Both of the knight checks can be taken, but rook b8. Game over. That's why you like, this is the stuff that has to be pre-programmed. Like, rook b8 just wins the game because the king is in the center. And again, we see the problem, the recurring problem of the king in the center. In this game, my opponent played a slightly subpar opening. I showed you how to take advantage of the slightly subpar opening, which was when the opponent tries to lock the position too early and overextends, especially black. When you play white and they play black, poking at it with the pawns is very effective. It is less effective when you play black because you are usually pushed backwards. In this case, because I had more space, I poked at the position and it resulted in me winning a pawn. Then it resulted in the opponent leaving the king in the center of the board, right? Like, my opponent played in a way where the king just got stranded in the center of the board. Now, g4 here is certainly winning on the spot, but rook b1 is not a bad move at all. It's crazy, it's +5 in this position. Already here it was like +1.5, right? When I won, you know, we see +1.8. But what's crazy is that even in the opening, like this position, this is just a French defense. This is just a French defense. It became a French defense from an Alapin. And what I've shown is that in general, taking space away from the opponent with moves like e5 is a pretty decent way to play. Already it's +1, and here it's like +2.5. How crazy is that? If I don't even have to take on c4, the computer just wants knight d2. It's telling me knight d2, and then you just take +2.5. You just can't play like this. You can't make up your own openings. You have to follow things that have already happened, right? I mean, that was a very instructive game. Like, how to handle, again, a pretty close position, how to target an opponent's king when it is in the center of the board. Black should have gotten the king castled much faster. Like here, black probably should have moved the knight, tried to get the king to safety. When the king gets stranded in the middle like this, you just lose. Like, this was maybe the last moment that black should have castled. And then the game would have gone on. When you leave the king in the middle of the board like this, I can zip in with my queen. The best move was certainly to trade the queen, to try to trade me off. Mate in 3. Crazy. Literally, just mate in 3. Immediately. And, okay, queen a7, of course we would have won the game as well. Would have attacked, the queen would have moved somewhere, like queen c8. And how would we have won here? We would have just probably picked the queen up, right? Wherever it moved. If the queen went to d5, we just have, well, the same situation. Actually, what do we have, a mate even faster? No. So I hope that was instructive. You know, clearly the 1000s, especially the second game today, are very decent. Very decent. And even this player, you know, if I didn't show you to punish the opening so quickly and we just had a game, it would have went on for a while. People generally are not blundering. You need to know how to punish the mistakes of 1000 level players in order to beat them. And that is the purpose of this slow run. That's all I have for you today. As always, you know where to find me if you want more instructive content. How to Win at Chess 1, my educational platform, Chessly, Chess for Babies if you are a baby, the chess deck, and so on and so forth. Catch you in episode number 20. Get out of here.